How you doing?
Oh man, I'm doing okay. Just, sort of figuring some stuff out and
Okay.
we're kind of making some certain life decisions for the long run of what should we do? Should we do this and do that? Not really, correlates with uh cryptozoology and filmmaking, but it's sort of like, we're at this point where we kind of want to do what we want to do and see if we're capable of doing it.
Mm,
So there's
mm.
a lot of possibilities and just kind of, yeah, just figuring things out.
I can really relate to that actually. I think this is since this summer, it's the first time since I started doing this that I made it my solo. I've made it an official company. I've made it my solo job
Yeah,
without engaging in other, contracts that I would do in healthcare and other things like that. I've stopped them all. I'm
right.
doing this. And finally, the fear is kind of creeping in. Whereas before it was kind of, well, I could just do a 3 month or 6 month contract, go back and do some filming, write another book,
Yeah.
etc., etc. No harm, no foul. Doesn't matter if nobody likes it or if it doesn't work out. And now I'm kind of like, oh, I better stop being nice to these guys. I really need, I really need them to buy my stuff. And it does affect your output in a way sometimes, or at least how you start to present your output. That's the main fear. My main fear is it will affect how I present my output. And then this
Sure.
rebellious side comes in and says, no, you're going to get it just the same and like it still. These two sides are like battling away. So I'm with you. I'm with you all the way, but
Right.
good.
And in life, it's like, every decision you're going to make, there's always fear. And, all the greats of whatever field you want to
Mm,
name do things because there's always fear there that's going to block that, destination, but they get
mm.
to the destination regardless. So it's like, you're on good shoulders, I guess.
Yeah. Basically, they're taking a walk down Alligator Alley. It says Alligator Alley, the sign at the front. They're on foot. And yeah, there are definitely dangers. But if you get to the end, there's a pot of gold or who knows, a burger shack or whatever it was you were looking to find in the first place.
Of
And
course.
yeah, that's the hope. If it all bottoms out for both of us, we'll just go back to work. Easy
Right.
peasy. You
Easy
know,
peasy.
what's the risk? Work will always be there.
It will always be there. Always be
Mm.
there staring you in the face.
Yeah, it'll be there. They'll say, "Hey, Jordan, long time no see. Welcome back to work."
Here we go again.
Yeah. Oh, look, I became aware of you when you were working with our esteemed colleague, dearly missed, Scott Modis.
Right.
And I also know that you did a bit of work with Carrick as well during the release of the Bodette film about this famous bit of footage, or at least you were present for that, some of the recording there with Scott. And I remember Cryptid Hunt as well. Yeah, because I'm always perusing the internet trying to find little sort of snippets that people are doing about, and I really enjoyed those on YouTube. And I just thought, let's have a chat about that, about those types of cryptids, those experiences with Scott and everybody else, what you make of it today, thoughts on the great man himself. It's almost 2 years on. I don't even know how long it's been.
Yeah.
And yeah, and just everything else going forward. I know that you're a director of it and an actor also of other movies. So let's talk about that as well. Let's talk about I haven't seen it, The Wilderness Night. I like I really like the concept of it. I love this whole thing. Man fights through his own psychological and spiritual madness when his guilty past is shadowed by a religious cult leader. I'm somebody that has a lot of church experience.
Mm.
Now, all these years later, still an avid believer, but you do encounter various characters within the religious sphere that
Oh yeah.
have, I'm going to say, fetishes. A fetish,
Right.
particular different types of fetish for certain types of guilt and
Yeah.
finger pointing, which is not necessarily either a Christian or a Jewish or anything else, a religious concept, love, forgiveness, all that stuff.
Of
So I
course.
saw the title of that movie and I thought, I think I already get what's going on here. I already
Well,
figured this out.
right. Well, The Wilderness Night too. That was, I mean, that's a whole nother topic, but I guess we can try to sort of squeeze
Mm.
everything together because, in a sense, where I am right now on my walk with everything regarding interests, hobbies, career, and mindset, it all sort of correlates with each other. With the Wilderness Night, that was a project that sort of came from, and I don't want to sort of, get off topic a little bit, but that sort of came from, yeah, just sort of very toxic beliefs and perceptions of the world, because I grew up Catholic,
Mm.
really just
Oh, that'll
non,
do it, all right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but I grew up like, first grade kindergarten in a Catholic school. We went to church, so sort of acknowledged, God and everything, but
Mm.
didn't really think much of it. And then over time, went to Sunday school every, Sunday and did the whole, rituals. So, but again, nothing really, touched the being of my soul, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
And long story short, I kind of came to a place where without religion, without a scripture, without a pastor or priest telling me anything, I came to a place where I genuinely felt something. I think it was the divine, however you want to interpret that. And when I saw a lot of fruit that was flourishing in my life, and then I started becoming part of the institution, they really just injected me with a lot of guilt-ridden concepts that really altered just my way of thinking, which turned into trauma.
Mm.
And you know it just kind of spawned into this ghastly, distorted perception of viewing everything as evil, sinful, darkness, horrific, feeling that with hellfire, end of the world, end times theology, that it just kind of brought me to a place where I can't win. Everything is against me. And you're trying so hard to, be embedded and, following the rituals
Mm.
and the system. But, but then you come to a point where your body itself, your mind and your body is fighting
Mm.
against that system, even though they're telling you this is how it is, this is what it's supposed to be. But then your whole entire being is saying, no, we have to reject this in order to survive and thrive. So I'm like, well, what is this? This is telling me this because they're using fear manipulation, but my
Mm.
body is saying something else, like it's reacting to the poison and it's
Hmm.
sort of cleansing my body. It's giving me a fever, I would say,
Mm.
because of all those teachings. So, yeah, long story short, that kind of birthed into the Wilderness Night, where I wanted to, make a film about that type of experience. And, you know, it, it was a film that took like maybe, gosh, 4 or 5 years. And again, there were so many different ways of sort of bringing the picture
Hmm.
um, to the screen. But I found a story where I thought that, it should be a lot about your own personal experience, because with any writer, artist, filmmaker, whatever, your personal experiences, your personal
Mm.
insights are being brought to the screen.
Yeah,
And the greatest fulfillment is seeing somebody else reacting to what you've experienced. And that's
absolutely.
the greatest joy
Mm.
in the world. And, you know, and of course during COVID, that when the film was finished, a lot of people were at home, and I felt like it didn't really make a necessary impact as I wanted it to. But we won a few film awards, which was great, and it obviously taught me a lot. But then at the same time, I was kind of thinking, what should I do next? And during COVID, I started to get back into the cryptozoology field because, of course, I've always been interested in it.
Mm.
As I mean, Godzilla, King Kong, like most people, like that's what brought me into it. And I remember coming home from my dad, or coming home from my friend's house. My dad was on the couch watching something on the
Mm.
History Channel about the Loch Ness Monster. And I'm like, well, what is this about? And I started watching it, then these images, it was the two I don't remember what the name is, but you might know what this is. It's the two plesiosaurs painting underneath like that brown, golden, murky water. Uh,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, and,
Yeah.
and and I saw that image. I'm like, wow, and I was
Mm.
just glued to the screen, thinking that this could be a possibility. And then this is the early days of the internet, so this is like what, 2001,
Hmm.
2002, and I just kind of thrived in everything I could on the Loch Ness Monster, and then of course Bigfoot came up, Mothman came up, and then it just became a smorgasbord of like, wow, these things might actually exist.
Mm.
And that the child in me, the little exploration child,
Mm.
was so excited to get involved. And from that moment on, I wanted to make my own show. It was an instant where after I got into this field, and I should mention this too, the first crypto show that I actually watched was, I believe it was season 4 of Animal X on Animal Planet.
Okay, that was a great show.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I love Animal
And
X. Yeah. Yeah.
that host who really tried to do a lot of the introductions really caught your eye.
Mm.
Um, and that was cool because I'm like, wow, there's actually, an audience of people that are into this as well.
Mm.
And then watching that show, and then there were others like Is It Real on National Geographic,
Hmm.
which took a more skeptical approach, but
Yeah.
I still enjoyed it. I liked the type of production they made. And other shows like on the Travel Channel, there was Weird Travels, which was one of my favorites. And then just kind of watched everything I can. I started using my VHS tapes to record. Still use VHS in the old days, and was recording every program and
Of
documentary.
course. Absolutely. Awesome.
Yeah,
Well, great
yeah,
way to preserve it as well. They're really hardy. They last a long time. Yeah.
right. And I think they're still maybe in my parents' house somewhere in the basement,
Wow.
but we never labeled. I don't know why we never labeled anything on
Oh, that would
VHS.
be a really two, 300 tapes, right? I had
Yeah.
something like,
So
yeah.
and I destroyed a lot of tapes too with a lot of
Mm.
rewinding and fast forwarding, but that was the sort of growing up and getting
Mm.
into cryptozoology, but also filmmaking as well and that sort of thing. So yeah, it kind of all connects.
Well,
Kind
I
of stuff.
think it's a great journey, and it's great to know that a lot of those programs really stuck with people. For me, it was being a little bit older. It was sort of first time I think shows of Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World and reruns of Leonard Nimoy's In Search of and things like
Mhm.
that really sort of first grabbed me in. But that period that you're talking about, when Monster X and all these other programs were on, I think that was like the first revival period. And that kind of thing actually led on to things like Finding Bigfoot and other shows, which actually wouldn't be around now if it wasn't for that small revival that happened in the early noughties.
Right.
This and with History Channel and perhaps a bit of travel too, other people like that doing these things. And I even wonder, would there even be conferences now or anything going on at all? Or would we just be going to Maine once a year to Lauren Coleman's International Cryptozoology Conference? There'd be like 200 people there who are really, really into the subject, but no one else. And it seems to
Yeah.
have made an arena in which we can all get involved. I mean, what's your opinion on that? Do you think there's scope for a wider group of filmmakers and researchers to actually jump into these subjects and start creating good content?
Yeah. Well, I've noticed now, especially maybe even like 2015, 2016, I started noticing that, I've always had like certain high points where I'm really into the subject, and then there's times, weeks,
Mm.
months, years where I'm just like, oh, whatever. And I've noticed, especially in the past, yeah, like 10 years, it's really taken off pulp
Mm.
culturally. Like it's been in the pulp culture,
Mm.
spectrum, but now I see it everywhere. I see a Bigfoot cutout every street I go on. Almost, I see a Bigfoot bumper sticker on someone's car, front or back. I remember I think this was during COVID too. I asked my wife, we're gonna go to a certain park. Let's count how many Bigfoot cutouts we see.
Oh, really?
We saw 4
In a park?
Yes, in a
Wow.
park. So, well, not in the park, but like driving towards the
Yeah.
park
Oh,
and like
sorry. Yeah.
yeah, seeing the just different like houses and neighborhoods having
Wow.
these different cutouts, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. But even with the documentary like feel too, I've noticed too that's really taken off,
Mm.
especially on YouTube and Amazon.
Mm.
Where I mean, even today, I was sort of just kind of refreshing my mind on certain topics, and I noticed there's just so many Bigfoot documentaries. They're just on
Mm.
even the most
Tons.
abstract, stories and legends, which is in itself interesting, but it's I sort of take it now as it's sort of like Marvel Comics, even with the Comic Cons, because
We're
now
in
they
that Marvel Universe stage of the Bigfoot story. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
I agree with you.
like we have Cryptid Con. Now
Mm.
every single state has a Bigfoot conference. Even
Mm.
20 minutes from my house, they have 40 minutes. They have a Bigfoot conference
Mm.
called Cataqua Lake Bigfoot Expo. And I think that was started in 2012, but I'm like, it's everywhere now.
Mm. Everywhere.
So and it's like a double-edged sword where it's great because, there's not a lot of, you know, embarrassment because of these taboo subjects.
Mm.
At the same time, I think it's maybe, and I know I'm sort of stepping on a few people's toes because a
Mm.
lot of people come from the very strict biological mindset, but then there's others that like the mystery of it too.
Mm.
And I'm on more of the mystery side because it kind of loses its flavor, sort of, where it's not as mysterious. It's not as, I mean, it is, but
Mm.
it's once you start seeing everyone sort of taking a piece of the pie, it's like,
Mm.
well,
Just
okay, I guess.
crack open a tin of my Bigfoot coffee here.
Yeah,
To my Bigfoot cooler with my Bigfoot brown sugar,
right. Yeah,
and taking my Bigfoot supplements, my
exactly.
NMNs. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
I think it seemed like finding Bigfoot was sort of
yeah,
the what really started it all. And I like to go back to like Monster Quest because that was a
mm.
show that I was really inspired
Yeah. I
by
love Monster Quest. Yeah,
to the point where it was my projects were almost like a carbon copy, but just because I was inspired by it, I
it's
was really
hard not to emulate parts of that show because they had such a wide coverage.
yeah,
Really, I mean, how are you not going to cover at least something that they covered? They
of
did
course,
it was like 60 episodes, something like that,
right.
all over the world, and like, at some point you're going to have to cover that ground again. And that's just the way it is.
Right. Yeah. And, being 15 years old, there's only so much I can do because I'm at the
Mm.
mercy of begging my dad to drive me to certain places. And thank God, like I asked him one day, I'm like, Dad, like, why did you like do this for me? Like, why did we go to all these places? He's like, well, I knew it was something you were into. So I wanted to, help you
Oh,
with that. I'm like,
nice.
yeah. So
Yeah.
thanks, Dad. So shout out to my dad who really supported my passion.
Mm.
And that was the blessing, but it was also the downfall of Cryptid Hunt because we went to Lake Champlain. That was the first place. Well, fun fact. Um, we drove there. This was like I think 2007. We drove there for a day, and from where I live, it's about a 6 hour drive.
Wow.
So we we
Oh.
we we got there first time being there, and we were really interested in speaking to a local witness. His name is Earl
Hmm.
Sprague, and he did the wooden champ
I know.
cutout.
Yeah.
Yep. He was also featured on one of the Discovery Channel
Mm.
documentaries, but we wanted to find him because he really appealed to us. So we were just driving just down in Port Henry, first time, just looking around, and then we drove by his like wood shop, and I see him sitting in the garage, and I'm like, "Dad, stop the car!" So he stops, and I'm like, "That's him! That's him!" So of course I was excited but nervous to talk to him for the first time. So I said, "Dad, can you talk to him?" So he goes in, you know, to talk to Earl. And then I walk in, little 14-year-old Jordan with my little camera, and
Wow.
just start asking him questions, which was really cool. And then we just kind of drove around, just around Port Henry, and then we drove back home. And I'm like, why did we do that? And
Awesome.
yeah, and again, I think,
What a dad.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I think I think because it's just to get out and explore, which is something that he wanted to do, but obviously you have a lot of cool
Mm.
pros that goes with it. And after that, I kind of wanted to make a more extensive trip. So, again, I can't thank my dad enough for taking the time and effort to encourage me to, progress with this field and the subject. And then we went to Lake Champlain the following year. So this is our second trip. And I made phone calls to as many people as I can. And this was the time of the internet where you can type someone's name in and their phone number pops up. I don't think they do that much anymore, but they did back in the mid early days, I should say. And that's how I found Scott. I typed in Scott Martis. It had a Vermont.
I bet he just picked up the phone as well.
He just picked up the phone and we started talking for probably like 30 minutes or so. And then he gave me the number to Gary Mangiacopra, who I think recently.
Oh wow, yeah, he did. Yeah, what a great researcher.
Very underrated, in my opinion. And I started talking to him, and we became good friends. And he sent me a lot of like just boxes, like 10-pound boxes of cryptozoology papers and memorabilia and VHS tapes. And I'm like, I was overwhelmed because I'm like, I can't process all this.
Wow.
But I think because it encouraged Gary to see, and Scott to see people, young people in the field that were taken seriously. And yeah, I was that kid in high school where everyone was just talking about Jersey Shore and all these other, wow, sports and stuff that I could care less about. And being intrigued by these stories and witnesses and just this phenomena that just grabbed my creative soul and exploration adventure spirit. And it became a snowball. And then I remember one day, this was actually a few months before we went to Lake Champlain. I was thinking of Sandra Mansi, and I'm like, I don't think she lives in Vermont. No, she probably doesn't talk to anybody. And then I just typed in her name, and then her name popped up at a Vermont area code. So I'm like, I don't know if this is her. I think there were two of them, but I think I called the first number. So I'm like, let's try.
Is that a common surname? That seems strange for there to be two Mansis.
I believe there were two Mansis, if I can recall.
No, I'm sure. I mean, it's not good. It's not a name I've ever heard here, but of course, that doesn't mean it's not common in Vermont. Yeah,
right. Yeah. And I was going to call her because I wanted to have permission to use the photo. So I called her. I was so nervous, and I don't even remember what I said. I just said, "Hey, my name's Jordan. Blah blah blah. Can I have permission to use your picture?" And I don't even remember exactly what Sandra said because it was all. I was so nervous. I just couldn't think at the time. And she was like, I don't know, something about, I don't even remember what it was, but she politely said, it just can't happen or no. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I hung up the phone, and then I'm like, what if I interviewed her? So, she said no.
That's much better than the phone.
Yeah, so maybe I can at least interview her. And she was impressed by that and said, sure. I'm like,
nice.
Wow. And of course, the little kid inside of me is like, it's like you're talking to the creator of Godzilla. That was my mindset, where I was just because I was so passionate about this field and talking to these figures that
she's a piece of history.
Yeah, that's how I viewed it. And these are people that I looked up to who are sort of, they're sharing these stories, and they're not part of the mold of society in my eyes. And we went to Lake Champlain back. This was, I believe, July 25th, 2008. And, I called so many different people. We interviewed so many different individuals. We felt just being in Lake Champlain, Vermont, especially. It there was something about it that really just caught my spirit, and just the way of life there, the community. I mean, I remember how clean the air was smelling compared to
Mm.
here. It was just so fresh and alive, and it was just great, and I really became friends with Scott after that. I remember we went up to his old apartment, and he had like stacks of
Wow.
research
I heard
papers.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah, like it was like, I hate to say it, it was so barren, like the inside
Mm.
of his apartment, but then on the right side, just stacks. All these
This is,
cryptozoological.
what do you think about that? And that's an interesting question, Shane. Being into this for so long and having done it, I suppose, as a full-time thing for the last 6 or 7 years, I've seen a lot of people, I've seen their lives so crumble with the obsession of the creature they're chasing.
Of
Often
course.
happens when people are chasing one creature, not many. Actually, I noticed that's also a thing. Lake Monster research actually doesn't take hostages. I've noticed that too. And people actually either go off the rails or their life seems to, uh, all of the life surrounding what they do stops and they just do that. Would you say that was your impression of Scott? I know he left the lake anyway. He was living in Florida with his wife. Or would you say that this was somebody essentially who got a balanced grasp upon it finally in those last years and went off to do something else while still, doing interviews and research and everything else and popping back to the lake once or twice a year? What's your opinion on that?
The thing with Scott, I remember because the times that I did call him to just talk about the subject, I think he was at work the one time, and I
Mhm.
heard like the cashier like ka-ching, ka-ching. So
Okay.
he was talking to me as he was, helping customers. And I knew from a previous interview he did on a different documentary, I remember he said there's not a lot of good jobs, and
Mm.
he had to suffer a lot of bad jobs just to stay in
Mm.
Vermont. And it seems to me that the drive drove him to not really pay attention to that, to the
Mm.
cares of the world, the anxieties that all of us feel.
Hmm.
And I think that was very interesting because to this day, I always think of Steve Feltham from
Mm.
Loch Ness. And here and there, just recently, a couple of days ago, I was watching his
Mm.
when he was leaving his home and going to Loch Ness on his van. I think it was like 1994 or something.
94 or something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And I just listened to what he's saying, and there was, oh my gosh, like here's someone that took what he loves and what
Mm.
drives him, and he's like, I want to do something with my life that actually means something. And what, 30 years later, you ask him
Mm.
again, and he doesn't regret a thing. He loves it. And that's kind of how I saw Scott too, because,
Mm.
you know, seeing what he was doing, it was the drive, I think, that just made him alive to survive.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, and I don't think that. And again, I don't think that really bothered him. I think it would bother certain people because they can't get out of the rat race and that corporate mindset of the 9 to 5 coming
I have
home.
to have X, Y, and Z to be
Yes,
happy. And absolutely. I mean, and I do definitely appreciate that. And I know from speaking to Steve briefly, and I will be talking to him again later this year when we go to the loch,
awesome.
that he took this big chance, but he had something to take with him when he went there. And
Yeah,
he's also an artist in a way as well, a graphic designer. So he had skills he could use. You probably see the little wonderful models that he does. People post them on his page all the time. I've got one from 2012. People have
I
got one
got
from
one too.
30 years ago. You've got one, and the great photos. So there's that there. There's a commerce. Everybody comes to the van in Doris, beach. He talks to them. He's there. So there's this whole. It's almost like having a stall in a sense. And Loch
Yeah,
Ness has got like 250, 300,000 visitors a year for the loch for Nessie. Whereas Champlain, I noticed when I was there, like Champlain, that the commerce surrounding Champ is actually very low. There's not a lot of Champ stuff going on. Really, you'd expect for this huge place. There's
of
great
course.
water boats, water sports, and boating, and all this other stuff on this in this wonderful area. But I thought, wow, they haven't really exploited this Champ thing very much here. That isn't that odd. So I think if anybody was based there as a researcher, it would be a little hard to kind of bring the money in any other way than just, having to slog it out in a local convenience store or factory or something like that, working in the silos.
Right. And from my mindset, I think the two places from the New York side and Vermont side, Port Henry would be considered like the Champ Mecca, Champ Center,
Mm,
but also Burlington has a few like,
mm,
dedications to
mm.
the culture. And I think because now they just announced too that they're having another Champ Festival in
Oh,
August.
great.
I believe that the first beginning of August, I believe. And I think because the organizers who are running the Champ Festival, I think that's what they're trying to do. They're
Mm,
trying to kind of give Champ, you know, its sense of what this is where it belongs, and this is
mm,
what happened. This is almost the history of Lake Champlain in a
mm.
sense, which is great. And I sort of look at it too, where I always wonder because I guess the Loch Ness monster is sort of the poster child,
Mm,
the image of modern day monsters next to Bigfoot, obviously.
mm.
But I think a lot of the lesser knowns, they're. I guess that's kind of where they're categorized. They're the lesser knowns. They're Champ is number two, or Ogopogo is number three, or vice
Mm.
versa. But it's always Nessie's always the top. So you know, I think the locals, excuse me, have embraced it. But I think at the same time, I mean, you walk into like a certain shop, there are some like little Champ souvenirs and
Yeah, I got an umbrella for the kids when I was there, and
yeah, like a plushie or
t-shirt
whatever.
and things. Yeah.
Of course. So in a sense, I guess again, it's like I see it as a double-edged sword too, where it would drive the tourism, but it also, in a sense, hasn't been tainted by
Mm.
pop culture at the same time, if that
I
makes sense.
see. Yeah, I
You know?
see. See.
So I kind of see it that way almost, where yeah, I love, going to a Champ or a Bigfoot
Mm.
festival or a conference and meeting with people who are seriously involved. Um, but at the same time, as you know, probably, and all, Scott certainly too, there's a lot in this field that are in it for the wrong reasons,
Yes.
more for themselves. And
I'm laughing and I'm reading you loud and clear. And we've all experienced a little bit of that. I've not only experienced it from that direction, but several others in several other disciplines because I cover lots of cryptids and other things too over the years. And I think one, it's to do with my failure to be able to shut up when I need to. That's a problem. And
right,
nobody likes to be sort of, I suppose, given the the blunt truth by somebody who seems otherwise quite polite and softly spoken. Takes them by surprise. And it's almost more of an offense, actually, than some mean person telling you they don't like you. So I don't know. There is that. There is that, but it's in every single genre. If you go into the
exactly.
paranormal, they've got it. If you go into mainstream science, they've got it. The ones that believe, you know, even with geology and archaeology and everything else like that, dinosaurs, everything,
Yeah.
the feathered dinosaurs to the pre feathered dinosaurs, all this stuff. Everybody's fighting each other and ragging out the other guys and trying to destroy their careers. It just seems to be human nature.
Right. And I think there is a danger in a sense when, yeah, with any career or field, once this becomes your identity
Mm,
and you're known as the lake monster guy or the
mm,
Bigfoot guy, and you take that with pride, and then once somebody comes in and starts, dismantling the identity, you're losing yourself
mm,
and everything that comes with it. Because if you don't know yourself and you only know the side of your identity as a monster hunter or a
mm.
cryptozoologist, then that brings out a lot of ugliness that
Yeah,
we've all seen in
absolutely.
all sorts of fields.
Or, Jordan, you could be that guy who was there from the beginning for the first 20 years when nobody cared. And now everybody wants a piece of it. And here they are tramping all over your territory.
Yep.
And I've
Oh
heard
yeah.
people say, my sites, my locations. And I often ask them if they own the land or if it's public land. And if they don't own the land, they say, well, that's clearly not yours. You're just there. And it's a research that you don't get to keep it. doesn't belong to you.
Exactly.
And a normal respectful person, if you're occupying the area, would sort of make contact with you, ask to sort of pop along and be shown the ropes. That's a polite thing to do, but they don't really have to. They don't need to. It's just a courtesy call, really, to say, "Hey, I'm thinking of popping along to places you pop along to. Are you cool with that? Or are we going to have problems?" That kind of thing. It's awkward. It exists everywhere. I personally don't like to hide information. There's lots of groups out there. So we're doing research and you've got to be a private member and we're not sharing it. I'm like, well, why are you
Yep.
doing the research then? Why even
Yeah.
do it? If you want to discover stuff, and okay, maybe don't share the exact locale because you don't want people trampling through there if you're looking for Bigfoot. That's different. But share
Right.
your results. This is the whole
Right.
point of what you're doing. It's amazing. And I think I should be interviewing you, but I'll just say this one bit. I think that we're in a post-religious society in the West at the moment, but we
Yes.
still have that need, post-corporate religious society, that need for religious belief, communal religious belief, and that's why
Yes.
people get so offended with these subjects because you're essentially doubting or besmirching their belief system. And
Yes.
that's why they're so mad at you. Otherwise, they'd be like, "Oh, that's interesting. Well, I think this," and just move on.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah. And of course, it's hard because there were Carrick and I actually talked about this too, where a lot of the people that I used to really look up to, who were, I guess, my idols,
Mm.
who I really saw as, man, meeting this person one day would just change my life because look at them, he's looking for monsters as a living. Oh my, like who does that? So, I want to meet him. I want to be his friend. I want to get to know
Mm.
him. And then once you start talking to these
Mm.
people, and then you really see who they are, and we're not going to name names, but you really see who they are.
Oh wow, yeah.
I remember Carrick, he dealt with a lot of that as well, and
Mm.
he told me, Jordan, I want to be the person that I always wanted to look up to.
Mm.
I want to bring something. I want to be, you know, I want to help people who want to be
Oh
interested
yeah,
in the field too.
yeah.
And I'm like, that at the end of the day, that's who you're getting. You're getting the younger
Mm.
generation of monster lovers and Godzilla and King Kong
Mm.
and animals and zoologists and whatever, dinosaur fans. You're getting all those people because they want to check this field out and they want to be, I guess, tutored in the right
Mm.
direction because you can easily be tutored in the wrong direction
Yeah.
when it comes to whatever. And I'm not talking about flesh and blood or paranormal. I mean, some
No.
people don't like that, but I'm just saying, as a decent human being and finding empathy with, as a fellow human being, that really needs to be stated because I think we still have a lot of people who are just, yeah, they're, and this kind of involves with politics where it's my ideology and your ideology. Your
Mm.
ideology is bad. Mine is right, or vice versa. And there's all this
Well, it's
fighting.
a polarized world that we live in.
Yes.
Going back to what you say about that old saying, you should never meet your heroes, you'll always be disappointed, and
Yeah.
that has generally been my experience in all but one or two cases.
Yeah.
But I think it's our expectations sometimes, and we don't have a context for where they are. These guys, if they're 40, 50 years in, sometimes some of them, they're like Bela Lugosi.
Yes.
They've been playing Dracula for 50 years. Now they're hooked on smack, and it's the same conversation 10, 12, 15 times a year at every conference. And it's drained the life out of them. It's no longer joy. It's just they're the
Yes.
image of the thing they created. And I
Yes.
think it's going to be a tough one. And I often thought about that with some of the disappointing heroes that I met. Thought, you know what? Yeah, the joy's gone out of it. You're the caricature of yourself, and that's inevitable after this length of time because of the issue of commerce. If it's a full time thing, you have to make some sort of commerce out of it, um, unless you can sustain yourself by your own means, which most people can't. So
Yeah.
there has to be this weird balance that you figure out between the sensational side of things, the conferences, and also you're out there really because you're full of the joy and wonder of exploration. It's hard.
Right.
And I don't know how many people survive that journey, truly.
Yeah. No, you're right. You hit the money. And I think genuinely too that, the recent conference I went to as well. Well, not even recent, just I guess in general, just sort of looking at even all the podcasts
Mm,
and like YouTube live
mm,
shows and I guess it sort of ties in with the documentaries as well, because even with documentaries, I've sort of noticed that they're all carbon copies of the same.
mm.
It's the same.
I said the algorithm.
Yeah, it's the same
Mm,
witnesses. It's the same mindsets.
mm,
It's the same. Even like I can't handle watching you know any type of paranormal show on cable. I just can't do it. The spook factor is just so overdone.
mm,
And I know that people like a good mystery and spooky weird stuff. I mean, that's kind of what got me into it. But at the same time, it's just been so
yeah,
it's overdone, and
yeah.
it's sort of becoming now where you can go on like a Netflix or any type of streaming service, and you find all the ghost punning Bigfoot
Oh,
paranormal
yeah.
shows, and it's all these scary looking things
And
where
all the copies. I can't believe it's not ghost hunting. It's like,
or Alaskan Bigfoot killer or killing Alaskan Bigfoot, something like
yeah,
that. I saw
yeah,
the other day. Yeah.
yeah.
So
It's a bear.
it,
It's clearly a bear.
yeah, and it's really disheartening because well, going back to Scott,
Mm,
we filmed literally his last documentary in the summer of 2021. Now I shouldn't say funny, but the random fact was Scott really wanted to get Christine Hebert, who
mm,
saw Champ on land, because he really thought that she's up there in age, and he was
mm,
nervous that one day he might not see her again. So he's like, we really need to like get her
mm,
story as almost like her last interview. So I'm like, okay, can you call her and let's
mm,
try to set something up? And I know she's been interviewed on so many different projects, and I
mm,
actually didn't want to interview her because she's been interviewed so many
mm.
times. So I'm like, I guess I'll interview her again. And this is what really caught my eye with her. So we did the interview. She had her two land sightings with
Mm.
by herself and with her mom. So
Oh,
I
this is
finished,
by the shack, right? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
the boathouse.
Boathouse. Yep. Sorry.
Right. And I was just kind of setting up my camera, putting it away, setting up my tripod, and she looks down at me and she points like, "How long?" I'm like, "What?" She's like, "How long?" "Oh, my wedding ring." She's like in her 90s, and her eye was so keen, just a little detail, like my
Okay.
little wedding ring.
Mm.
I'm like, "How did you notice that?" So that to me really brought up
Mm.
like, I don't think she's crazy,
She's
or
got a good eye for detail. Yeah.
yeah, and especially at her age now, I mean, God, how sharp was her eyesight back in the day? So,
Wow.
and you kind of have to bring this to fact where if she's hallucinating, number one,
Mm.
she should be hallucinating all the time if she lives along the
Mm.
lake and seeing dinosaurs everywhere. So you kind of have to wonder that. And if someone's hoaxing her, yeah, that's maybe a possibility. But in the
Mm.
dead of night, right by the water, who
Seeing
knows?
two dinosaurian type masses, trundling through the water out of the forest. It's an
Yeah,
amazing thing. What happens with hoaxes like that? People who are delusional is they keep, and I have it with several witnesses. They keep coming back with other sightings that they just remembered, or that the previous one reminded them of
yeah,
when they were young, or this or that, or several different types of creatures always coming in, and it's a factor because the delusions carry on happening, the hallucinations carry on happening. She's only got those two, right? And that's it. Never
yeah,
reported anything else ever again. Why not?
exactly.
Why not you say you see them every year?
And you sort of have to wonder that because again, if you living by the lake, and I'm sure you've heard this, they have to be aware of what they see all the time. Even a
Mm,
swimming moose or a
mm,
swimming deer, because I know a lot of people assume that with the horse-like head, it's always
mm,
a swimming moose or a deer. So I've always wondered that as well. But I guess, yeah, at the end of the day, you have to wonder, what did she see? I just
no,
I
absolutely.
don't know. I don't know what to
Mm,
say. And then you get different reports of it having a snake-like head
mm,
or a short head with a humped body, or
mm,
just different I guess creature reports, but
mm.
ideally the same but sort of acting differently or swimming differently or whatnot.
Suppose the body's in different positions, different
Right,
actions of movement and swimming. Yeah, sure.
right. And I always wonder too, and every day it's always like, well, they definitely exist. Then on certain days, oh, there's no way they exist.
Ugh.
And on certain days, oh, they could exist. I don't have. I just don't have. I do have opinions, but I do have mindsets where I'm like, they do exist. They probably don't exist, or I just don't know. I don't
Mm.
know. And I guess that's the drive that a lot of people prefer because, again, it's that enticing mystery that drives a lot of people.
Well, absolutely, it's that, and that's the whole point. It's about even if it turns out we're chasing modern day folkloric legends. It's almost like a modern folklore happening in real time that we're looking into, or it's at least the future folklore that we're experiencing right now today. Even if that's all we're chasing, it still fills you with wonder and hope and this age of exploration sort of spirit that's re-energized in people and gives them hope in their lives, actually. Because when you're in the drudgery of every day and work, and then suddenly you see something that makes you think, wow, there's more out there, or there could be more, you feel kind of good about that. You feel lifted. And that's a nice thing, I think. And I always think, even if you're just chasing modern day fairies and unicorns, Andy, then it's not
Right.
a terrible thing to be doing. It at least gives people something to think about and to hope for.
Yeah, and I'm that's kind of where I am right now in a point because, again, with such a polarized society, I've sort of begun to embrace the grayness of life, the black and white.
Mm.
Well, against the black and white, I embrace the just having mystery, but I think
Mm.
that kind of drives people insane, especially the very, you know, European intellectualism, where it's so we need to have answers for every single thing.
Mm.
And I remember I had a interview with the brother of David Bentley Hart named Addison, he was a priest in the Anglican Church for, I believe, 30 years.
Mm.
His brother David is a very well known. He doesn't like to be called I don't know if he likes to be called a scholar, but he's a well known author. He's wrote a lot of books, and there is a tradition within even early Christianity about fairies, which I'm
Mm.
like, what? And there was a very famous minister called Robert Kirk, the fairy minister, and he was a Christian, but he also believed that these fairies, like fairies, elves, fauns, whatever, was basically another not as known creation of God. Like they were between the angels and the humans. And I'm
Okay.
like, interesting. And he goes into this whole spiel, and I'm pretty sure you've heard of these theories as well, where even a lot of like the fairy folklore has a lot of similarities with the ghosts and UFO phenomenon too, where
Yeah, lots. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, like I believe it was well, Robert Kirk, he believed they were subterranean people, unacknowledged creations of God, and he was the author of The Secret Common
Mm.
Realm, it's called. And I think, and it's funny because, and I kind of want to get into this a little bit, where Robert's or I don't know if he theorized or he witnessed, but he said that when fairies die, their bodies perish and their spirits become orbs.
Hmm.
So the project I'm working on right now, I'm working on a Bigfoot documentary about my local hometown here in the Western New York area. And I talked to a hunter who's had 3 sightings. He he got involved because after his first sighting, he got into it. But then as he got into it, he started things started happening to him.
Hmm.
Things where I know the average biological flesh and blood crowd would,
Mm.
crucify him for. But he started having episodes of poltergeist paranormal activity in his house. He did a radio show or he did a podcast. This was like the early days of when he was really into it. He had a book fly off his shelf during
Wow.
his interview. His third sighting, without sharing too much, basically the creature that he saw, it was looking under a log, like looking for grub, I guess.
Mm.
And I believe, if I can recall, he had his
I had it in
gun.
sights. Okay.
It turned into a blue light.
Huh.
He told me. Like a blue light, and I guess that freaked him out, and he got out of there.
That'd do it for
Yeah,
sure.
that will do it.
That'll
Yeah.
do it.
But then he's also experienced many incidents of missing time, and I think
Mm,
his I don't want to paraphrase too much, but I'm just trying to remember
mm,
exactly what he's told me. But I believe his friend, either himself or his friend, had moments of missing time when they were in the
mm,
field researching, and they couldn't explain it. So again, and there's other people too, like Doug Hyjek, Monster Quest,
mm.
very scientific of flesh and blood.
Now,
He's
Doug's talked to me about the orbs and all the different things
wild,
and the
wild.
weird globe alien invasion of his back garden.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and I wonder too because John Keel, Mothman
Mm,
researcher, he saw a lot of parallels with the paranormal and fairy lore, and people even describe Bigfoot as an overgrown fairy, and people describe Bigfoot doing same things in the woods like ghosts would do in a
mm.
house, not sounds, weird noises, smells, and everything. So again, I'm not saying this is what it is, but it's
No,
like,
but I mean, it's worth entertaining. I
yeah,
think
of course.
when we mentioned that, when I said earlier that I have to convince myself I'm not just looking for modern fairies and unicorns. There
Sure.
is something in that, and even with if you look at sort of angel and demon lore, fairy lore, in the whole fairy lore, from the little orcs and goblins and hobgoblins and uh, boobachs and all these different things that we have here, and pucks and bukas. It's strange. Some of the little ones, and I wrote something about this in my book called "The Little People or the Hairy Fairy Folk," and it was about all these little foots were they once mistaken for gnomes and goblins and things like that, or is it the other way around? Is that the point? And fairies come in various different sizes. Did we just identify those as those things in our superstitious past, but they were real flesh and blood creatures? Or
Mhm.
is it now, and the same with angels and demons, that we have this sort of modern perspective where when I say, no, that's a creature, and those are aliens flying around in the sky, and they are, in fact, what we always thought they were in the past. Are we just changing the labeling of these things through every single epoch to match what we now perceive the world to be? Could that just be it? Is that really what we're doing?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I don't know if you know. Do you know the researcher Andrew Colvin?
I don't know.
Okay, well, he's a very controversial figure, not because of, well, I guess in the mainstream, because I kind of see him almost sort of like John Keel, where he was really against the mainstream of a lot of what's being shared through television and podcasts and all that.
Mm.
But and I'm not. This is from his own YouTube channel. So, and then his YouTube channel is Andrew Colvin. So he says it on his channel. So
Okay,
I'm saying it right now. I'm not taking anything of
okay.
it. This is what he says, but he shares some very interesting subjects. Um, he said back in the '60s there, and I don't know. I don't know how he verified this. I've been wanting to tell him one of these days. I'm going to have a conversation with him, but he said that during the '60s, the CIA used cryptozoology as a front to spy on other countries. So,
Mm.
like looking for Bigfoot, Sasquatch, or Yeti,
Okay, yeah.
they would go into like the Himalayas, but the front was to
Mm.
spy on whatever. So, in
There was
his,
talk of Marie Jean Kaufman being a spy for the CIA and all that time she spent in the Caucasus and Russia and yeah.
Mhm.
Mm,
Well,
mm,
it's interesting because he thinks there's this whole conspiracy between Mothman and Bigfoot, which I'm kind
mm.
of like,
Okay,
okay, like what are you talking about? Like, I was kind of like, huh, I'm not sure what
that's
you mean, but
interesting. Yeah.
I'm talk more. And he was basically saying like there were times where, so during Mothman when it was being seen in Point Pleasant, his family, and this is record, this is online, you can listen to any interview he gives. His family encountered it, and if I remember correctly, after they encountered it, they started getting these like supernatural gifts
Okay.
where his cousin or vice versa was invited to work for NASA, or he does work for
Mm,
NASA. Um, Andrew was actually invited to, I believe, Harvard. He had a scholarship to Harvard. I don't know if he went or not, but they something
mm.
intellectually, psychologically, consciously.
But they were kind of boosted. They were upgraded.
Upgraded, yeah, in a
Yeah.
sense. And
Booster pack.
yeah, so I mean, I've heard stories like this, not with Mothman, but just
Mm.
other phenomena too, where you hear stories like this all the time. So I don't know if that's true or not, but he always viewed Mothman as a superhero that was fighting against the Men in Black. Now this is him as
Okay.
a kid.
Wow.
So, and he believes too that pop culturally, it's the Mothman has taken on a very negative, dark, evil,
Hmm.
dark angel entity tone, which in his mind is for some reason that is sort of
Yeah.
the projection that they're trying to make it.
Just can't live that bridge incident down, huh? You know,
Yeah, yeah, and in his
we made
mind that
one small mistake and they never let you forget it.
right. So again, I've sort of wondered too where, like why are certain people so obsessed with keeping the spooky factor of
Mm.
cryptozoology, but who knows? I don't know
It
if that
sells,
yeah,
basically.
it
It
sells. Yeah,
sells.
that's the
And
mindset.
actually, the
Yeah.
flesh and blood aspect of cryptozoology is a low sale. It's the low sale end of that pool of commerce. I know that because it's something I've stuck to religiously for
Yeah.
years. And the temptation to sort of ghostify and all these things has been very strong because you see all your paranormal buddies, with their thousands upon thousands of views, just because you want people to know what you're doing. And you say, no, no, this is a flesh and blood thing. And looking at this evidence and these footprints and hairs, and people are like, yeah, that's really cool. That's interesting. Anyway, more ghosts. And it's just how it goes. So I think it's about that. Yeah, when I was most surprised when I first went to a cryptozoology conference in the US. It was CryptidCon actually in
Okay.
Kentucky, and the amount of sort of Ouija board type stalls and everything
Yep.
there. And I thought, is this like cryptozoology? Is this like a seance conference? Like, what the hell's going on? It
Right.
was religious in tone because it is a
Yes.
religious belief. It's at the very minimal lowest point. It's a philosophy.
Yep.
And I was just like, okay, this is weird. I thought we would be like just a bunch of Bigfoot guys, a few Nessie advocates, and
Of
on we
course.
go.
Yeah.
Didn't think I'd be
Yeah.
looking for Ghost Girls and all these other shows.
Well, that's kind of I'm sort of noticed that too, even with like yeah, like the Mothman Festival too. There's a lot of vendors. I mean, they even say too that the Mothman was a positive creature because it
Um,
sort of it made Point Pleasant survive. Like that town is alive and thriving right now because of
yeah.
it. So who knows? And that's kind of what you sort of need to get to, because once you're involved in this field, you're going to experience all these
Mm,
other things too, and you kind of have to come to a point trying to understand like what is this and what is that, what does this mean. So I don't know. It's like yeah, that's the spookiness is what sells, and my ideology in life, I guess, is that there is mystery. There is the world can't be black and white. And I'm not talking from a negative perspective, but I believe in good. I believe in empathy for everyone. And I try to see the world, yeah, more through a lens of, yeah, there's like enchantment, I should say.
mm, mm,
There's a very
yeah.
big disenchantment with society,
Mm.
I think. And I think
Reality for sure. Yeah.
reality, yeah. And I
Mm.
think because institutional religion has done a terrible job,
It's not been
and
great.
even our education system has done an awful job, just
Mm,
equally, they're just as bad, have really dissented, just, yeah, really, I don't want to say magic, but we can't even just go into the woods and be still and listen to the birds, the trees, the wind. I mean, this is not new age. This is just simple living of life. We're
nature. Just
yeah, this is
nature.
nature.
Mm.
Yeah, and I really wish there was a more enchantment view of looking at the world, because I remember seeing an article that says, left brain thinking is really what's going to kill society.
Mm.
This rigidness, yeah, black and white. This is the right path. That's the wrong path. Just do away with it all. I really want to become part of, a life of that acknowledges mystery, but not be so superstitious about it, but just
Mm.
acknowledge that, yeah, things do happen. And if you want about the claim of, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence,
Mm.
I remember I didn't brought that up. Addison, David Billinghart's brother, brought that up, and he's like, "That is the stupidest quote I ever heard." I'm like, because you can't take something that's material, and extraordinary. It's material. It's equally as extraordinary. I think the problem he sees is seeing something that's paranormal and making it more out there. No, it's part
Mm.
of society. It's part of the world. As Paulino says, tomorrow's paranormal is going to be tomorrow's science. That doesn't
No,
mean,
but just look at some of the things we understand already that would
yeah,
have been firmly in the realm of the paranormal many, many years ago. Even from a biological standpoint, I always talk to people about what did the first person that dove below the ocean and witnessed an octopus not only take upon the color of the object it was sitting on, but its shape. What did they think about that animal? That it had supernatural powers, probably. It was a magical creature, right? We know exactly how that works now, how it could do that. But to somebody 2,000 years ago, that would have no explanation whatsoever, other than it was imbued with magical powers.
right.
That's it. What other explanation could be? Look, it's a rock. Now it's turned into a rock in color and shape, a spiky rock. That was a smooth animal. And yeah,
Right.
but now we're like, yeah, well, that's because the octopus has this and these photos, and that's how it changes. That's how it works. So perhaps orbs or mind speak or infrasound or any of these things dematerializing, cloaking, whatever people want to go for. Perhaps they're just as easy to explain if only we had the chance to examine the creatures that were exhibiting these biological powers.
And I've always wondered too, like, even with Bigfoot being, let's say Bigfoot is a flesh and blood animal and
Mm.
it's in the woods, it's very smart, sure, great. But even just one misstep, it never has. Well, you've heard encounters where it gets
Mm.
hits by a car or
Mm.
people shoot at it. Yeah, that does
Mm.
happen. But how come? I've always wondered why there's millions of trail cameras out there. I mean,
Mm.
I would say even in very remote areas, people go to those areas because they
Specifically for
know
that reason. Yeah.
for that reason, exactly. And how come even a juvenile, because you hear stories of juveniles being crazy and climbing trees and doing
Mm.
wacky stuff. Why haven't we captured even just a glimpse of even a juvenile
I
just
know.
waving or just something?
It's
Something.
it's really it's very, very troubling. And I think we should have, because if they are animals, and yeah, okay, perhaps they can smell us. Perhaps it's the same as, a trail cam in the woods stands out as much as somebody coming into your house there where you see the bookshelf and putting a completely new book on the shelf while you're out. And you come in, so straight away you go, the hell, something's weird here, right? What's going on here? That's not my book. And
Yeah.
immediately you know your own terrain. So perhaps there's something in that, but at the same time, it's a bit of a get out of jail free card. They can see the lights, they sense the infrared, all of this stuff. They hear the shudders, they can smell it. Well, it's still just an animal. Even a chimp, even a gorilla, even a chimpanzee would come up and investigate that
Right.
piece of equipment. They'd investigate.
Yes.
The cats do, deer do, birds, all kinds of things come and check them out. These trail cams. This lack of a body, and also the best footage still being the Patterson Gimlin footage. It becomes more damning every year that it's by itself without
Yes.
any accompaniment other than Todd's footage,
Right.
which is remarkable, but remarkably suspect at the same time.
Right.
10 out of 10 for being so bold. Um,
Well, the wild thing is too, and this happened again here in my home state, well, west side of my home state, where this woman I interviewed for my documentary, I met her actually on Halloween. I think this was when was this? I met her and she told me a story where, well, actually it wasn't her. So on Facebook there's like they have like certain groups, like Bigfoot groups of like states of like New York
yeah.
and Pennsylvania and such. So there was one in New York State, and the woman I interviewed was talking about her story, her sighting on the page. And this woman messaged her saying, "Oh, I had a sighting, and this was on this type of road." And she's like, That happened the road right next to me is that road. She never met this woman. She just found her
Wow.
on Facebook. And the woman who said she had this encounter, this happened in the 70s. So almost like 40, 50, yeah, 40 years before
Wow.
she's had stuff on her property, where she was in the woods with her cousin and she can hear this thing crashing, roaring,
Mm.
breathing, running. She didn't see it, but she hears this enormous thing crashing through the woods, and she was traumatized by this
Mm.
thing. And then 40 years later, I'm talking to this other woman right up the street, up on the hill, who's having stuff happening on her property,
Wow.
where her horses are being affected by it, her
Mm.
dogs are being affected by it, where her mother is waking up in the middle of the night and sees this thing looking in the glass.
So that's it. I mean, the anecdotal reports, that's really, and the footprints to a large degree as well, but that's really the strongest aspect of this
Yeah.
because you have such a wide array of witnesses from such varying backgrounds, many of them with no skin in the game whatsoever. I mean, they never heard of a Bigfoot, they didn't know what it was. They had to go searching online to discover what they'd seen. That kind of witness. A
Oh,
lot of that
yeah.
around. And when I see those people, they tell the story the same way every time. They're still kind of baffled and hoping somebody's going to tell them it's all in their head or they made a mistake. They almost want it, you know?
Yeah.
I made a mistake, didn't I? I'm a fool, aren't I? Come on, lay it on the line now. What did I really see?
Right.
Those are the best witnesses to me. The antagonistic witness, the one who doesn't want to be a witness. You know, my
Well,
absolute favorites.
funny enough, I've known this guy for many years. He made fun of his wife. He's from Ohio. He made fun of his wife because his wife believes in Bigfoot, but he was the skeptical.
Mm,
You're insane. I'm smart. I know everything. You're ridiculous. So then one day he wanted to go hiking in one of the state parks. And he's like, I don't feel like it. This is like 5 a.m. And his wife is like, oh, you should go. And he's like, oh, fine, whatever. And this is like early spring. He's taking a walk. Nobody at the park. It's just him. He's taking a walk and he hears howling or whoop, like whooping. Whoop, whoop. He hears it up on the ridge. He's like, oh, what's that? He hears another one down in the ravine. Whoop,
mm,
whoop, whoop. So like two different ones. He almost thought they were communicating. He looks over. This thing is standing there. It was a white colored, like a shaggy dog, like shaggy hair, huge. I think 8 foot tall, 7 foot tall, staring at him, and that petrified him.
mm.
This is the guy who made fun of his wife. Was like, this is ridiculous. There it is, right in front of him. And I asked him, "What did you do after that?" Well, I couldn't go back because this thing was blocking the way going towards my car. And then he said, and from what I remember, I believe it turned around, it ran without making a sound.
Wow.
And I'm like, what the hell? He goes into his car and he's crying. He's calling his wife hysterical for 2 hours in his car.
Wow.
And this is the guy who thought you're insane, you're nuts, super skeptical about it.
Mm.
And then his wife is so excited because he
Just come
saw.
back and look for it. Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
they go back the next day and they find a footprint on the trail. And what was it? I don't want to mess it up. I think he said that he saw what he described as like green barf that was on
Okay.
the trail. And then when he came back, it was gone, or vice versa.
Huh.
But he was panicking. He couldn't
Mm.
be. He just had to leave. And since then, he took me to the spot. This was last year, I believe. So I'm actually making a little short documentary about it.
Mm.
He took me to the spot. He showed me where it is. I stood exactly where the thing was. I had to hold up my camera to see how big it was and everything. I mean, what do you do with that? And what are the odds?
Mm.
He didn't want to go hiking, but his wife encouraged him to go
Yeah.
hiking. Fine, whatever. He got pushed himself to do it. And lo and behold, and you hear stories like that all the time where it's just in the most, you're not thinking about it, you're just doing something because you're doing it. And then
And he's in the primary times, the dawn and dusk times, you know, the twilight times when many animals, especially predators, are about, you know, they're about good
and
hunting
he
time.
exactly. And he told me because I was driving with him. He's just telling me, yeah, sighting happened over there. That woman in that house saw this thing over there. Like he's just pointing out all these different sightings. And he said there's a house that goes further down from the park where he was at, where they encountered a white Sasquatch, white colored, shaggy haired, whatever Sasquatch.
Has to be the same one.
What do you say with that? I mean,
yeah, well,
ideally,
that's the point. I've talked to so many people like yourself over the years who I don't believe are suffering from any mental affectation of any kind, or they're not seeking attention, and all different types of sightings. They just mostly would like you to tell them that they made a mistake. That's kind of what stands out to me. When that person has that aspect, come on, so what, I probably saw a bear or a deer or whatever it is, didn't I?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, doesn't really sound like it, Doesn't sound like bear behavior. Doesn't look like a bear. Don't know what to tell you. It's even weirder here in the UK when you get British Bigfoot sightings, because that's a puzzler, It's a puzzler. So how do you explain that one away? And people are convinced, like completely convinced, there's no bear here. There's nothing that could mimic something like that, even for a few seconds. There's some pretty shaggy hippies out there in the woods from time to time.
Well, and and you kind of have to talk to people who spend their time in the woods all their life and they never seen it or experienced it. My funny enough, actually, my uncle, I share him these stories and he's just like, okay, whatever. Like it just doesn't connect to him at all. I actually went camping with him. This was a couple years ago, 2019, summer 2019. And I was telling him about just, people I've talked to, and, we're in the right setting or in the cabin, there's woods around us, perfect time to talk about it. And the following October, so this is a couple months after, he goes to the camp, and he has like these native instruments like drums and banging on the drums. He loves to like chant into the wilderness and hear the owls. It's just it's very a spiritual moment for him, let's just say. So he was doing that, just kind of singing and doing everything. And the next day he goes there, either it was the next day or the next trip up, he goes to his camp. Somebody was imitating his voice.
Wow.
Down in the ravine where he heard it. And this now
imitating his singing or his speaking voice?
Literally his voice, imitating his singing voice. And he's 2 miles off the beaten path. This is like rural woods.
Wow.
So never heard anything like that. He lived in the woods. Like he spent a year in the woods by himself.
Okay.
Like this is like the 70s. He's one of those very eccentric guys.
Okay.
But he told me, Jordan, I peed my pants. I ran to the cabin, locked the door. It was scary. And he was like, he's questioning, what the hell did I just hear?
Yeah.
And he's just thinking, Sasquatch? Now, I'm not saying it's a Sasquatch, but this is just what came to his mind. So, and this is right after I tell him my story. So I'm like, am I feeding him something so he would believe it's Sasquatch?
Well, of course, it's in the memory banks now. But yes. I mean, with some of the weird people out there, you kind of want to hope it was a Sasquatch and not some psycho down there that's been watching you and now wants you to know that they were listening to you the other day when you're doing your chants with your nephew. I mean, it's it's just a freaky thing. I've been out in the woods here sometimes. There was a time I was up in Scotland, and I mentioned this once or twice before to a few people. I was looking for Loch Ness, actually, for Nessie, but I went up into the Great Glen Highway there. It's really heavily wooded. It was January, so that nobody was around either. There's loads of felled trees. And as I was coming down this steep incline, about 2 hours away from the town, so not really far, a good walk, I looked up, and the incline was kind of like this, and I thought I saw a humanoid shape duck behind a tree. It was a millisecond in my mind, and then suddenly I thought, okay, if that's real, one, that's either a person or the thing you're looking for, and it's hiding from you. So you've got two options here now. Either if it is the thing you're looking for, Sasquatch, then one that's a real animal, and you're 2 hours away from town. You have to deal with that situation, and it has to deal with you and decide what to do about the situation. That's, do you really want to be here? Because it's a make or break situation. Two, if it's not Bigfoot, it's a freaky ass human hiding from you and following you through the woods. And
Almost
that's
as scary too.
worse. That's worse.
Well, this
Yeah.
this was crazy story. So the guy who encountered the white Bigfoot, who
Mm.
didn't believe in anything, he was going to the same park and he had a thermal camera with him.
Wow.
It was just him and his wife, and this was like
Mm.
in the dead of winter. He likes to go in the dead of winter because it's like no one else is out.
Mm.
So he goes into one of like the parking lots. He's parked there. He has his scope on, and he sees a car that comes in like 1 o'clock in the morning. He's like, "Who the hell is out here?" Even though he's out there, looking for Sasquatch. The car parks, and like 3 or 4 people come out of the car, and they're parked in like total darkness, like
Mm.
black. And he's looking in his thermal camera. All 4 of these guys are walking towards him, and he gets out of there. He did
Wow.
not want to deal with that because even like I know he's told me Ohio they have a lot of drug problems too,
Oh, okay.
and
Okay.
and they encountered a guy who they thought was planting drugs behind a rock or something.
Oh,
So
so this is like meth houses in the woods and all that kind of
yeah,
stuff. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, especially I guess these days now,
Mm.
they've encountered a lot of drug people. But I think might have been actually during the pandemic, but.
Wow.
But still, it's like, you don't know who you're going to encounter, and even people who might do harm to you too. It's like, I'm not saying there's a murder on every corner. No, of course
No.
not. But it's just like, you just got to be careful of your
Well,
surroundings.
you're
And
already isolated, basically. You're
yeah,
isolated. You're out in the woods at a strange time for 4 individuals who can't see you to get out of their car and start walking towards your direction.
yes. And they're
It's
not
just,
even acknowledging or saying hi or help. They're just quietly walking towards
how
you.
far away were they?
Ooh, I think they were maybe 100 yards or less.
Okay, so that's, I mean, do you
Yeah.
think they could see him or?
I, I think they went in, they turned their lights off, and then they're
Wow.
trying to conceive themselves. They didn't do a really good job because they were right there. But I think in the cover of darkness, they were creeping up, but then he saw it, he got out of there.
Wow. There's
So
so many strange things that go on. We were filming a documentary recently, and this is something I didn't really know about. I've heard stories before, but I just didn't think about it. We were in Exmoor, which is in Devon. Yeah,
Beast of Exmoor, yes.
we were looking for the Beast of Exmoor, and we were up on this sort of big mount, and there was a car park not far away, but like a really small one, middle of the countryside. People often go up there for walks, and there's all these kind of moor ponies wandering around, really cute small horses. Anyway, we're out in the middle of nowhere, and we had this drone, and as we're coming back towards the car park, we heard this kind of moaning, and I thought, what's going on there? The whole car park was full of doggers, like couples and whatnot that come to meet and do things. And I was like, oh my goodness, like what the hell? How are we going to get back to our car?
Oh, man.
So one of the drone pilot basically, he flew the drone over, and it's got a huge searchlight on one of these DJI kind of drones.
Oh, wow.
Just put the searchlight down, and then we heard some sort of shouting, and then a whole bunch of car doors shutting and zooming off into and I just thought, like, he cleared the car park basically before we got back, and I just thought, oh gosh, that would have been so greasy, such a greasy thing. And I just thought, oh, like these aren't the perils I was expecting.
Yeah.
you know.
Right.
There you go. Yeah, it's a greasy world.
Well,
So,
crazy enough too, Salt Fork State Park, which is known
yeah.
for Bigfoot in Ohio. Um, the guy was telling me a story where someone was just driving down, and these
Mm.
2 pickup trucks just came out of nowhere and was pinning the car, and
Wow.
they were trying to like skid him off the road or rob him. But like, yeah, like it's been happening a lot too. So again, you're dealing with the paranormal, but then it's like
Mm.
you're dealing with other flesh and
People.
blood
The
people
people.
that can do things too. So
Yeah, the
you just
people.
got to be careful.
Gosh. I probably will leave it there, Jordan, but I just wanted to just ask you to let everybody know where they can find you. Where can they find your films? How can they get in touch and give you sightings, which I'm sure you'd be very happy to receive.
Sure. Well, as of right now, I'm actually working on a new YouTube channel. This is kind of like my film, my YouTube channel and film company. It's called Whispering Hollow,
Uh-huh.
and it's basically I've been kind of fighting over exactly what I want to do with this channel, and this is really just going to be my own journey of things I'm interested in, especially with cryptozoology and all the documentaries and stuff I filmed already that haven't seen the light and day in like
Mm.
2 or 3 years, which I want to get out. So it's basically going to be a channel really dedicated to, you know, folklore, supernatural, God, but really my, again, as we talked about, re-enchanting the world and seeing the world through a right-brained creative art
Mm.
lens. Just really trying to get away from the negativity of being
Mm.
very black and white, but embracing the gray, embracing not knowing,
Okay.
which I think people really need to, will find some sort of healing. And you can find me on Facebook, just Jordan Warner. I'm really behind on trying to get a website and everything. It's been kind of crazy, but I'm working on a lot of projects right now with this YouTube channel. So I'm hoping to get out. Hope maybe this weekend, tomorrow, even Monday. I don't know. It's just talking to somebody and trying to get a few things done. So hoping it will come out sooner rather than later.
Well, I think, it sounds really amazing. I can't wait to see it, revive the new reformulated Cryptid Hunt, renamed, rebranded, get out of there because I used to love that, So it would
Thank
be
you.
good to see something from you again online. Jordan Warner, thank you so much.
Thanks, Andy. Appreciate it.